The human brain, while only accounting for about 2% of body weight, consumes more than 20% of the body's glucose-derived energy. It is, in essence, an energy-intensive organ, and carbohydrates, broken down into glucose, are its primary fuel source. However, not all carbohydrates are created equal, and the type, amount, and frequency of carbohydrate consumption can dramatically influence long-term brain health. In particular, high-carbohydrate diets rich in refined sugars and starches have been increasingly implicated in promoting chronic brain inflammation and memory loss. What was once viewed primarily as a concern for metabolic disorders like obesity or diabetes is now emerging as a key player in cognitive aging and neurodegenerative diseases. When we consume large quantities of refined carbohydrates, white bread, sweetened beverages, pastries, and highly processed snacks, we cause repeated surges in blood glucose and insulin levels. Over time, these metabolic spikes contribute to systemic insulin resistance, a condition where the body and brain become less sensitive to insulin. This resistance is not just a precursor to type 2 diabetes. In the brain, it disrupts glucose uptake, energy regulation, and even neurotransmitter balance. Neurons that cannot access or properly metabolize glucose are starved for energy, making them more vulnerable to stress and functional decline. More insidiously, chronic high-carbohydrate intake fosters the formation of advanced glycation end products, AGEs, which result from the binding of sugar molecules to proteins and fats. AGEs accumulate in tissues and organs, including the brain, where they interfere with cellular repair, trigger inflammation, and generate oxidative stress. In fact, AGEs are now recognized as significant contributors to the pathological processes underlying Alzheimer's disease. They promote beta-amyloid plaque formation and tau protein misfolding, both of which are toxic to neurons and disrupt normal brain function. This biochemical environment, rich in AGEs and oxidative stress, leads to the activation of microglia, the brain's resident immune cells. Under healthy conditions, microglia help clear cellular debris and protect neural tissue. But when chronically activated by metabolic toxins, they shift into a pro-inflammatory state, releasing cytokines and other inflammatory mediators that can damage healthy neurons. This state of low-grade, persistent neuroinflammation is now considered one of the central drivers of memory impairment and cognitive decline, especially in aging populations. The cognitive effects of such diets can be observed well before clinical dementia sets in. Numerous studies have shown that individuals consuming diets high in refined carbohydrates perform worse on tests of memory, attention, and executive function. Brain imaging has revealed that such diets correlate with reduced hippocampal volume, the region critical for memory consolidation, and increased markers of inflammation. Even in younger adults, excessive sugar intake has been associated with slower cognitive processing speeds and more frequent mental fatigue. Yet it's important to draw a distinction here. The danger lies not in carbohydrates per se, but in the quality and glycemic impact of the carbohydrates consumed. Complex carbohydrates found in whole grains, legumes, vegetables, and fruits are metabolized more slowly, provide fiber and phytonutrients, and do not provoke the same inflammatory and oxidative cascade. In contrast, ultra-processed carbohydrate sources spike blood sugar, flood the brain with metabolic byproducts, and leave behind a trail of inflammation and cellular dysfunction. The warning is clear. In an era where convenience foods dominate and sugary products are ubiquitous, the long-term risks to brain health are being quietly magnified. What feels like a harmless indulgence today, a sweetened latte, a muffin, a plate of white rice, can, over decades, accumulate into a pattern of dietary toxicity that the brain pays for with memory loss, foggy thinking, and reduced cognitive resilience. And this may not just be an aging issue. More children and young adults are consuming high-carbohydrate, low-nutrient diets than ever before, potentially setting the stage for early-onset metabolic and neurological dysfunction. But the message is not entirely grim. Diet is one of the most modifiable risk factors we have. Reducing refined carbohydrate intake, switching to whole food sources, increasing dietary fiber, and balancing macronutrients can not only protect brain health, but also reverse early signs of cognitive impairment. Anti-inflammatory and brain-supportive diets like the Mediterranean, DASH, and MIND diets offer clear frameworks that emphasize plant-based foods, healthy fats, and complex carbohydrates. In the end, the brain reflects what we feed it. A diet overloaded with refined carbohydrates may light a slow-burning metabolic fire that, if unchecked, can consume our memory and mental clarity. But by making mindful, evidence-based changes to how we eat, We can cool that inflammation, support energy stability in the brain, and preserve the cognitive function we so often take for granted until it begins to slip away.